What's up, everybody? Brett here, back today with something that I'm excited to read to you guys. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot of reading, I'm not going to lie. I'm hoping my voice holds up. But it's going to be the Ogre Kingdom's roster reveal. So we've kind of been waiting for this for a while. We've sort of already got it. I think most of the roster's already been confirmed and seen. So I don't know how much new information is going to be on here. But feel free to stick with me for the rest of this video. And we'll find out together. I haven't read it yet myself. I just kind of lightly skimmed through it. But we're in for a good time, I think. So, guys, if you're not interested in reading this whole thing, just sit back, relax. Allow me to do that for you. And we'll get through it together. Hopefully there's some good tidbits in here. So without any further ado, welcome back to TotalWar.com. We kill for them all. The Ogres are coming to get you. If you've got that song out of your head yet, first, well done. And second, let's dive a little deeper in on what these powerful giant bastards have to offer the world. Conquest and feasting and battles by the dozen, yes, but who gets involved? Below you'll see each and every Ogre Kingdom's unit the faction can hire. Much of them come under the monsters heading, as every ogre is a terror no matter his size, and only the support of Noblar swarms keeps the army from being nothing but a wall of meat and mass. Finally, as usual, things are subject to change. We'll be back with further details on the legendary lords, their starting positions, and specific mechanics in short order. Okay. Excellent, excellent. I will say I have noticed that whoever writes these is having a lot more fun recently, or they told them they can write a little more freely. The whole, like, powerful bastards line. I did see a ton of, like, little funny, like, quips and things as I skimmed through earlier. All right, first off, the Big Daddy Chungus himself, Greasiest Goldtooth, on his three-wheeler of doom. Trade Lord, Grecius, Tribe Stealer, Drake Crush, Gate Crush, Horde Master, Goldtooth, the shockingly obese, was one of many whelps sired by the infamous tyrant of the Goldtooth tribe. That's a great name. Like his brothers, Grecius grew up to become strong and fat. Unlike his brothers, he killed and ate his own father. As word spread of such prodigious deeds, many tyrants decided to join the ruthless new leader of the Goldtooth tribe, and soon, once again, the Ogre Kingdoms had an over-tyrant. These days, grown older, larger, louder, and richer than ever, Goldtooth's coffers fill faster than his Noblars can count. Yet Grease's rampant success has not diminished his greed, or his all-consuming desire to conquer everything he sees. As the fattest lad around, Greasus rolls into battle on a custom-made, Noblar-pushed cart stuffed with gold, gems, and plunder. The glory of being too rich to walk writ large across the faces of his enemies. His iconic scepter is used equally to steer and smash skulls, while he is always chewing on a massive leg of meat, or equally using it to scratch himself. He is an inspiration and a hero to all ogres, and a terror to fight on the battlefield. There's some controversy over this. This cart not being part of his original design. In the lore, and I agree this is a little bit ridiculous, but still awesome. The flavor is that he's declared himself too rich to ever walk. So Noblars, just a never-ending stream of Noblars, just rolls underneath him. Hundreds of them just trying to keep his weight up and, get crushed and replaced. So CA came out and said that was way too expensive and ridiculous to animate. So they went with the cart option instead. I don't blame them. It makes more sense. But the dreaded three-wheeler was much contested at first. Everyone has their place, or price rather, as your massive, powerful opponent sprinkles you with his spare gold. Most combatants are going to rethink their place in the battle. And then Scepter of Titans. The legendary staff of Greasus grants him huge power boosts, particularly when taking on other ogres to retain his dominance. So in the lore, if I remember right, his scepter, which you can see here, this big scepter, is some sort of like Sky Titan weapon that he has, which hits with like incredible power and, gives him the ability to knock down what they call a gate crasher. Gives him the ability to just knock down gates and do all this other pretty awesome stuff. You gotta love him. I was very excited for him. I don't know. He was the guy I was like the most excited for, but looking at his model, he looks a little strange. I'm hoping he plays like really fun to the point where he just like becomes my main. I'd love to be a Greasus Goldtooth main. Next up, Scag the Slaughterer. He is the legendary prophet of the Great Maw, also known as the Gore Harvester, and the Maw that walks, dragging his massive meat pot behind him attached to his back with a series of painful tearing hooks and chains. Scag hacks and rips at his enemies in a glorious blood-fueled dedication to the Great Maw. In his wake he leaves a trail of dismembered limbs and body parts, which is the duty of the Gore Noblars to retrieve and deposit into his cauldron. See these guys standing up there, cheering him on. His history is as sad as it is brutal, brought to his current sorry state by a tyrant to whom he fed the wrong Noblar. However, the punishment only connected Scag more to the Great Maw, making him one of the most powerful gut magic wielders in the world. The lore of the Great Maw includes. So yeah, it's going to give us a lot of spells to go over. Brain Gobbler is a hex. The spellcaster chomps through a severed skull, gobbling up the brain and projecting the decapitated victim's worst nightmares into enemies' minds, sapping their will to fight on. Single target leadership debuff. Overcast version has extended effect duration. We've got Bull Gorger as an augment. Devouring the heart of a bull, rhinox, or mournfang, raw vitality is projected into the Great Maw, increasing the ferocity of the ogre's attacks. Single target large buff to melee attack and armor-piercing weapon damage. Got it. Toothcracker is another augment in an area. By consuming a hunk of tooth-breaking granite, the spellcaster bestows the rock's resilience and the sturdiness of the mountains themselves into his brethren. Increases armor and missile resistance for all units in an area. We've got Bone Crusher and Explosion. Stuffing a handful of bones into his mouth, the spellcaster crunches them up whilst cursing his foes who are crushed by a giant fist which pounds them to dust. We've seen this, I think. I'm pretty sure we've seen Bone Crusher on display in some of the videos that were shown. A small AoE that deals large damage after a short wind-up with significant armor-piercing properties. We've got Troll Guts, a regeneration spell. After downing the toxic and utterly repulsive innards of a troll, the ogres would seem to stitch themselves together before their enemies' dumbfounded eyes. Significant single target heal over time. And then the Maw, which I know we've seen. The Butcher can summon the power of the Great Maw itself, causing the ground beneath to split wide open and crush any foe trapped within it. And from what I saw, it has a massive, Winds of Magic cost, something like 20 plus Winds of Magic. And it seemed to do a great amount of damage. Overcast version does more armor piercing. As well as full access to the lore of the Great Maw, Scag can summon units of Gorgers to his side at a moment's notice. The Gorgers are, and that to me this sounds very similar like Throt summoning rat ogres, right? And Gorgers I know from skimming are unbreakable, which we'll get to, so that's pretty cool. The Gorgers are Scag's army, about as close as he'll ever have to friends, fellow exiles and rejects from Ogre society that he found in the mountains after the Noblar incident left him wandering and armless. So if you don't know, just quick, he accidentally cooked the wrong Noblar. An Ogre tyrant chopped off his arms and threw him into the dark. And that's where he met the ever hungry Gorgers. The Gorgers tried to eat him, and he attached his cooking instruments into his arms, fought off the Gorgers, made them his punks. I'm going to use the more polite verbiage. Made him his punks, and now they roll with him. They're like, damn, this is the only guy who's hungrier than us, and they follow him unto death, which is pretty sweet. All right, Lord options. Nice to finally see them, just kind of laid out, especially for people who don't know the Lord that well, or not the Lord necessarily, but the unit types that well for the Ogre Kingdoms. You finally get a chance to really understand what the army composition is going to be. So the melee variant, the standard variant, are Ogre Tyrants. Ogres call the leaders of their tribes tyrants, and it's easy to see why. They're the biggest and strongest individuals in a hulking race that prides itself on these physical features. To claim rulership over a group of ogres requires a mighty brawler, a creature powerful enough to wrestle a giant to the ground or smash his way through a fortified gate using only his bare fists. An ogre tyrant uses his tremendous size and brawn to dominate, earning the right to command the tribe by displaying prodigious feats of what the ogres respect the most: strength, violence, extraordinary girth, and a healthy, all-consuming appetite. Much of ogre warfare revolves around the need to eat, and the deliciousness of well-cooked and smartly prepared flesh of all their enemies. Rat or lizard, human or greenskin, it's all good enough for the pot. In battle, this is represented by powers gained by the killing of routed enemies, using various organs and limbs added to today's stew. Each kill builds a meter that allows for the use of 3 special abilities. So Dismembers a Hex that decreases acceleration speed and charge speed, helpful for running enemies down or stopping in advance. We've got Massacre, an augment that gives additional armor-piercing weapon damage, base weapon damage, and grants units the ability to cause terror, also very good. And then Butcher, regeneration on target unit that gives a very high healing per second and gives significant vigor regeneration. Unlocking and using these abilities will be key to exploiting every aspect of the Ogres to your ends. So I'm not sure. It sounds to me like something very similar to, like the Dark Elves, who, as the battle continues, you get more and more kills. You feed your murder mastery, and from there you unlock, buffs. This is a more active system, so you get your kills, you build your meters, and then you have access to spells. It's almost like a cool, fun mix between the Dark Elves and the Tomb Kings, who, after losing enough men or skeletons, they are able to summon Ushabti. So it kind of, it's another nice play on that system, and I think it's a fun one. You always probably prefer more active options than passive ones. So Slaughtermaster. Around camp, butchers are given a wide berth, for it is best not to get close in case they are looking for extra ingredients, as fingers or whole limbs have been known to go missing. In battle, however, butchers are most often found right in the thick of the fighting, where they use their cleavers and magic to great effect. The largest, most fearsome, and most powerful butchers are given the additional title of Slaughtermaster, and there are few things that walk or crawl that such expert killers have not chopped up and prepared for a ritual feast. So, to me, Slaughtermasters basically seem like mini versions of Scag, and they're going to be the casters, but I would expect them to also be quite formidable in melee as well. Maybe even tanky, I'm not sure. With the ability to heal, thanks to that lore, they'll probably will be quite tanky. They'll be monstrous sized, probably great HP pools. Very reminiscent of Famir, or what's another good example? The River Troll Hag, definitely probably a comparable example as well, but they are Lord level, so you'll probably be able to buff the hell out of them with your levels as they level up. So Ogre Kingdom's heroes. The first one's going to be the Hunter, the one that I think is kind of the coolest. I remember reading lore on Ogre Hunters and how their society kind of creates hunters. They're kind of like the loners, the guys who don't want to live in society. They go out and they become badasses and kind of earn their worth in the tribe by bringing back monsters for the tribe. So Ogre Hunters are solitary wanderers, outsiders from their own tribe, or perhaps even exiles. Those that survive become fiercely independent warriors and savvy stalkers of beasts. Bereft of a tribe's protection and beefy companionship, lone hunters must learn to track and kill while simultaneously not becoming prey to any ferocious beasts. It is all too common for the hunter to become the hunted. Although most no longer belong to a tribe, hunters periodically drag an impressive kill back to an ogre camp for a special feast day. Some return to the tribe of their origins, while others wander throughout the kingdoms. An ogre hunter who has tamed a stonehorn is a celebrated individual. Stonehorns are oblivious to the most grievous wounds, and the only proven way to break one is to take one of its eyes, which is no mean feat given the beast's stone-armored skull. After a time, the wound heals. Often the eye even grows back. But by then, stonehorns are so dumb. But by then, Stonehorn has been persuaded to allow a rider. A hunter might keep such a beast as his own mount, or if he wishes to boost his reputation, he could gift the beast to a tribe, for Stonehorns are much coveted by all right-thinking ogres. A hunter aboard a Stonehorn gains a loyal companion, a fierce friend, and incredible melee weapon strength, alongside other significant stat upgrades, the 3 things any ogre needs. They have the mount Stonehorn. So these guys didn't mention that the Tyrant or the Slaughtermaster might be able to have a mount option. It makes sense to me that they might be able to ride a Rhinox or a Mournfang or something like that, even a Stonehorn, but it doesn't explicitly say that. So I'm gonna assume they don't until proven otherwise. You guys might be able to let me know in the comments whether or not that is the case. The Butcher here. Butchers are typically, and these guys are like mini slaughterers as well, it seems like. They're typically more rotund than an average ogre and have even worse personal hygiene. They often resemble walking larders, for in addition to being caked in dry blood and offal, they adorn themselves in chunks of meat, along with an array of meat hooks, cleavers, filleting knives, and even special tenderizers tucked into a leather apron or even pierced through their flabby skin. A butcher must be prepared to use these items in their gore-soaked rituals at a moment's notice. Of all true ogres, only the butchers do not wear a gut plate. They trust their guts to the protection of the Great Maw. That's a cool little lore tidbit as well. Nice. Everyone else is so scared their souls are going to get ripped out of their bodies through their guts. These guys are like, nah, the Great Maw got me. Very cool looking as well. These dudes are going to look sick, man. They're going to look awesome in combat every single time. They're going to be probably the most cinematic race, perhaps. I really can't wait. The Firebelly, who was showcased today on YouTube. They made a little video with him and some of his animations. He looks amazing. The fire spells, the like lighting up of his weapon and swinging it. There's like smoke animations. He looks sweet. Kind of has almost like a Samoan sort of look to him. I don't think that's. I think that's pretty intentional. Because they worship a deity. Let's see. Firebellies are the roaring, blazing priests of the ogre deity known as the Firemouth. So it's almost like they're volcano worshippers. So, you know, I'm not saying the indigenous islands people worship volcanoes, though they might have in some instances. But they did have, you know, cultures that revolved around the knowledge that volcanoes were a thing. And these guys, they've got the tats, right? They've got the powerful build, and then these kind of cool masks. And I like how they did like the necklaces, the color scheme. It all looks sick. I don't know what the hell this insect thing is on his belt. Maybe it'll tell me. Probably not. Quick to mirth and anger alike, Firebellies are garrulous and vital individuals who are readily welcomed into any ogre tribe. Fire burns within these larger-than-life prophets in a literal as well as metaphorical sense. Bald and broad, their ruddy skin glows from within, and their bare chests are tattooed extensively with symbols of destruction. When a Firebelly's wrath is roused, he can breathe out a cloud of billowing flame so fierce that it can melt through chainmail in seconds. He has access to the lore of fire, and Firebellies have various abilities stemming from their infernal combustion. So it's so funny. Like in the lore in the Warhammer world, I saw this comment on the YouTube video and it made me laugh because it's so true. All the other races, like humans, elves, they spend their entire lifetime trying to master the winds of magic and not be destroyed and consumed by accidentally miscasting spells, basically, or, you know, saying their spells wrong and being consumed by the chaotic magic. These dudes literally drink lava and just spit out pure fire. These dudes, they're so awesome. They're like, nah, I don't need any of that fancy book learning. The Firemouth God's got me. So they've got a Fire Breath attack. Flame Incarnate is a ward save ability that grants melee damage reflection. I can't wait to see damage reflection in action and see how powerful that is or is not. And then Eruption Explosion attack, dealing reasonable fire and magic damage. Okay. Now we get to the units. First up, the Noblars. Look at this dude's got some bling. Looks like some different stages of Noblars, perhaps. Kind of interesting. Maybe this is just like the ones who were hanging out with Greasus. Noblars are wicked creatures possessed of malicious but limited cunning. They are not too distant relatives of the goblins that plague the world, and are similar to their green-skinned cousins in height, with most specimens standing little taller than a man's waist. Noblars are cruel-minded, and their ability to do harm is only limited by their lack of physical strength. Ogres tolerate the creatures in their camps, especially if they make themselves useful by carrying and fetching things. In battle, a large group of Noblars can be, if not exactly formidable, then at least a bit dangerous. So, they're expendable, of course. Not exactly loved by their larger compatriots. Absolute meat shields for meat shields. They can hold the ground for just long enough to get your other forces into position. They're slow with low leadership. They're likely to be outmaneuvered and outmatched quickly on the battlefield. I never underestimate the power of cheap meat shield units. Zombies are amazing in vampire counts army compositions. You've got fully chevroned goblins in the greenskin roster, can be super effective. I'm curious what buffs they'll give us that we can apply to the Noblars in our armies to make them attractive to us instead of just taking more Mournfang cavalry, you know? Next up are their missile infantry, the Trappers. These outgoing and vindictive Noblars are the largest of their kind, and delight in catching and torturing the small mammals that populate the foothills of the Ogre kingdoms. Hunting is too sporting for these Noblars, who much prefer to trap their prey. To this end, they have perfected the art of laying out jagged man snappers, pits lined with stakes, wickedly barbed nooses, and other cruel devices that will incapacitate the unwary. Once they have snagged something, they like to play with it, usually jabbing it with sharp sticks, before devouring it or bribing their masters with it as a light snack. So, while just as expendable as their Noblar melee friends, the first missile unit Ogres have access to, they do serve a role to harass enemies. They have Vanguard deployment to get in a position early, and when enemies get close, they will launch a volley of traps, dealing damage and slowing them, perfect for stopping a charge. I mean, you could put these guys right in front of your front lines, let them break the charge, and then you countercharge with your Ogres. I'm curious if you'll be able to upgrade them to get things like Stalk or Poison attacks. Either one of those two things would make them much more useful. Think like Nasty Skulkers for the Greenskins, but with a ranged attack. Or more similar perhaps to some of the Skaven Slinger units that have poison and nets. So those are the things that come to mind. And those things play very well. And depending on their cost, they could be very effective in multiplayer as well. Alright, monsters and ogres, my lord. First up, the Ogre Bulls, the basic boys. Big, brutish, and extremely violent. Ogres are simple and straightforward creatures. They know what they want and use their brawn to take it. The Ogres don't do contemplative head-scratching, preferring to smash things they don't understand. The bull charge forwards is their favored way to crush any opposition and greedily grab what they like. And what Ogres want is power, respect, wealth, and perhaps most of all, an endless supply of meat to feast upon. Ogres excel at fighting, and this, along with their greed and lack of concern about right or wrong, means that an Ogre army is always ready for a battle against anyone, anywhere. History is replete with examples of Ogres being paid to fight, and even sometimes being paid not to join a fray. When they do enter combat, Ogres make frightening opponents, for they are savage and can sometimes devour the fallen where they lie. In the heat of battle, this horrifies their opponents, who must fight the blood-splattered vanquisher of their former comrades. Given the chance, an Ogre will barge into combat using his great lumbering mass as a weapon. When working together, Ogres can harness the tremendous momentum of their formation to deliver an overpowering impact on anything they collide with. It is a living avalanche, an immense tonnage of muscle and fat behind heavy iron gut plates that slams the enemy before the individual Ogres themselves begin to lay about with their brutal weaponry. They often cover their offhand with a spiked metal gauntlet, a habit which originated from the traditional sport of pit fighting. The gauntlet can be used to bat aside even the strongest attacks. So they're giving you a lot of stuff kind of hidden in like fluff, but they're telling you they have a special charge. They get some like missile resistance perhaps, or whatever. The ones that have the gauntlets, they're like shielded essentially. What was the other thing? They have probably have a mechanic that allows them to eat during battle, which maybe replenishes some HP or causes terror or something like that, maybe at the expense of something else. They have 3 variants here: monstrous infantry variant, the standard variant, we have the dual weapon variant, and then the Iron Fist variant. Alright. Unique characteristics: all Ogre units, bulls and above, cause fear, being the embodiment of cannibalistic nightmares for all races, young and old. They can also destroy walls and doors during sieges, smashing them apart with their weapons and bare hands. This will be cool. You'll have to be always concerned about the Ogres during sieges, because they'll break in anywhere. They also all have the Ogre Charge ability, as referenced earlier. Representing the powerful and terrifying impact that is visited upon any who stand in their way, it reduces bonuses for being braced against their charge. And then dual weapon bulls have a bonus versus infantry, while those with Iron Fists have additional melee defense, and armor and count as being shielded. Alright, so all of the above. 1 second, guys, as I just blow my nose. Apologies. Still recovering a bit from the cold. I'm trying to, push through and not cough into the mic. Pretty rough. Pretty rough to get sick. Alright, Iron Guts here. They're the Ogres of any given tribe that have the most status and the best armor and weapons. They go into battle armed with massive 2-handed weapons, be they enormous scimitars, rocks bolted to tree boughs with iron bands, or simply gigantic versions of the traditional Ogre club. Iron Guts wear large, ornamented gut plates to show off their elite standing, and cover their meaty arms and boulder-like heads in heavy armor plating cobbled together from various conquests over the years. These guys will probably make up the bulk of your higher tier armies. They'll be your frontliners, almost certainly. Veterans of much combat and many feats, they're the strongest standard ogres anyone could hope to never see. They deal armor-piercing damage and have vastly superior armor compared to their brothers, and they will drink you under the table, eat you out of house and home, beat you at arm wrestling, then fall asleep embracing you. True friends. Truly, they are magical. Maneaters up next. Love these guys. They look so cool on the battlefield. The ones we kind of already have in Total Warhammer 2 look sweet. I love that they're using shields from other nations as their gut plates. That is so funny. That's awesome. Maneaters inherit the cultures of the lands they visit. That's such a good detail. I'm trying to look at the picture and see if there's anything else like that worth noting. I'm not seeing anything right off the bat. They inherit the cultures of the lands they visit rather than spread their own. These mercenaries learn the fighting skills and adopt the style of dress appropriate to the lands in which they fight. For example, a man-eater in the Empire might wear breeches and an ostentatious feather with a brace of huge pistols across his chest. One who has been campaigning in the jungles of the Southlands, on the other hand, might go into battle as a savage orcs do, that is, wearing an undersized loincloth, a gut plate, and nothing else but smeary war paint. I'd love to see that. I don't think we've seen that in the game. Ogre man-eaters are veterans of many campaigns fought in far-off lands. Traveling mercenaries beyond peer, they have spent decades accruing scars, tall tales, wealth, and exotic war gear before heading back to the Ogre kingdoms. Man-eaters have fought throughout the old world and beyond, and many races attempt to recruit such fighters into their armies, promising food, gold, or whatever else the ogres want in return for their services. It is the pay that matters, not the foe, although with some contracts, man-eaters are awarded fallen enemies to eat, so in those cases the enemy may matter. Ogres eat anything, but they have preferences. They're the gourmands of the ogre world. When they return to the ogre kingdoms, man-eaters take any opportunity to bore their tribe mates with long, fanciful war stories, some of which are even true. Although such tales are tiresome, an ogre tyrant is always happy if he can call in the services of 1 or 2 units of man-eaters to aid his tribe. They will be used to lead important attacks or hold a vital part of the battle line. They are famously stubborn opponents and usually prefer to fight to their last breath rather than flee. They have lots of variants. A standard variant, an iron fist variant, a great weapon variant, and then the pistol variant. So unique characteristics, the impressive and terrifying things they've witnessed far afield make all man-eaters immune to psychology. They've also learned the ways of the Empire pistols, and they are just as deadly in melee combat, but can also fire on the move to soften up their enemies. Spent enough time in foreign lands to have particular tastes, for food. So I think I saw in another video that they are considered a very high tier. To unlock these guys takes a long time. We'll see if that remains the case. I want to say they were like part of a tier 4 building, which can take a long time in campaigns to get to that point. Sometimes turn 50, 60, something like that. So, I don't know. Maybe, I'm hoping you'll be able to play with them a little bit before that. Or at least maybe get some of the lower tier variants earlier. The Saber Tusk pack. These different designs look sick. Whoever did the faces, they look awesome. This one looks like what's his name from Final Fantasy VII. You guys know what I'm talking about. I haven't thought about that in so damn long. Red in tooth and claw, an apt description for a saber tusk, as this powerfully muscled hunting beast is a creature perfectly evolved for slaughter. A lone saber tusk will bound into the midst of its prey, slashing and stabbing with its elongated tusks, seeking to sever arteries and disembowel its quarry. The snarling assault that follows is a fury of pounces, bites, and ripping claws. Should the entire pack of saber tusks attack at once, then even the largest beasts that haunt the mountains of Morn can be quickly brought down in a howling flurry, leaving a red mist hanging in the frosty air. I'm wondering if that means it has a bonus versus large. It may. The fastest thing in the ogre army, and strong enough to pull down almost anything in a pack, though liable to rampage if hurt, so it has rampage, can receive a huge number of buffs, including Vanguard deployment, Stalk, and Frenzy. Amazing buffs from having an expert hunter in the same army. So that's very good to know. I love that they're kind of in tandem, just as they are in the lore. The hunters do buff stuff like that. I like that. Not a cute little kitty cat. Do not pet. Excited to see how they function. If they function similar to the war lions of the high elves, that's kind of what I'm expecting at the moment. But they may be an anti-large variant based on the description. We'll have to see. Next up are the Gorgers, the last people invited to prom. Even more ravenous than an ogre, Gorgers are degenerate eating machines consisting of nothing but taut muscle, claws, and ferocity. The beasts are so hungry that they will gobble up anything they can scrounge, even the most tainted of things. To aid a Gorger in its all-consuming quest to feed, he can distend his jaws in the same way as many serpents do in order to swallow larger prey. If that weren't enough, their mouths are crammed full of teeth. They grow rapidly through their slimy gums, replacing themselves daily or sometimes even more quickly. I just see the bad guy from the old Spawn movie, the clown, and the thing he shapes into, the crazy demon. That's what the dislocating jaw thing makes me think of. While fragile, Gorgers are as close to a stealth ogre as you will find, surprising enemies at high speed with armor-piercing anti-infantry attacks. They'll probably function very similar to Mournfangs, or not Mournfangs, rather, Mourn Ghouls. Mourn Ghouls from the Vampire Coast. That's what I'm thinking these guys will function like. Driven half-mad by hunger and solitude in the mountains, they are unbreakable combatants that fight in a frenzy, so frenzy and unbreakable. Amazing. And then Vanguard deployment completes the package of a terrifying prospect. So very strong units, it sounds like. Vanguard deployment, frenzy, unbreakable, cause fear, very quick, and they have stealth. Armor piercing and anti-infantry. What else do you want? Mourn Ghouls, however, don't see much play in competitive, so I don't know if they'll have their own niche. Maybe they will. Hopefully they do. I love seeing every unit get used, and I always do my best to showcase units in my gameplay that nobody loves. So, like the Giant. Nobody loves or respects the Giant, but to me they have an awesome place in the roster for almost every faction, and I don't think they get enough respect. They're just like the perfect all-rounder. They're cheap. You can get them kind of early now that they've adjusted their position in the tier list. They used to be a very high tier unit that was worthless by the time you got it because you'd be getting stronger, cooler units. But now that you can get them earlier, they're a little bit cheaper. They just act as giant meat shields that can help your lords and heroes beat down enemy lords and heroes. Or they walk into the front line, they cause terror, they absorb all the missile, attacks that your enemies focus on you. Then you just pull them back with their massive HP, and they usually have nearly unbreakable leadership. So we'll see if that's the case for the Ogre Giants. They're enormous lumbering brutes that stride the world seeking battle, food, and strong liquors. They are humanoid in appearance, although their features are coarse and mishapen, and they are dull-witted even when compared to an average ogre. An ogre tyrant, if he can restrain himself from attacking a giant to prove his own superiority, will often try to recruit the solitary wanderer into his tribe. Sharing food or intoxicating drink with the enormous lummox often does the trick, as do promises of an easy life full of eating and drinking. They're massive and lumbering even for the ogre armies. They are a terror to face on the battlefield. Hired specifically to be a super ogre, their strength and power outweighs even that of a tyrant, and then lightly armored and missing the special effects of actual ogres. I'm sure they'll have a place though. Maybe they'll just be a bit more armored than a standard ogre, standard giant for the other races, because every race most races have a giant, and it's cool to see how they make them each individual and unique. And speaking of individual and unique, the Stonehorn is definitely the centerpiece unit for the ogres, and perhaps one of my favorite monsters in all of the Warhammer fantasy lore. They're massive beasts of muscle and violence, each several times the size of a Rhinoc, and if it can be believed, several times as dense. Intelligence is of little import to these great beasts, however, for each Stonehorn is quite literally a living fossil, its skeleton hardened by the same rock as the mountains where it makes its home. As legendary as their hardiness is, their belligerence. In fact, it is said that a Stonehorn will take any opportunity to headbutt something to death and trample its corpse into paste. We've talked a little bit about the lore of these things already, but it is quite cool. Their hide being nearly impenetrable, their faces become exposed. This is actually their skull, because they charge into things so much that they rip the skin off their own faces. We talked about the eye thing and how you train them. They have to stand in front and throw a spear and try to hit them in the eye and then hope they don't get gored before the thing smashes into them. But I think there'll be different variants of these guys. Just absolutely rampages through enemies, sowing terror and dealing immense damage. Takes hard-headed to a whole new level, granting missile resistance, and once tamed, a good friend. I think there may be two variants of this. One that has, or maybe not, or maybe just the hunter gives it a ranged component whenever it's mounted here, and then maybe there's a standard variant, perhaps just a standalone unit. I don't know. It doesn't say here. I wish it did. I wish it said if there were variants or not. Ogre Kingdom's missile monsters and beasts. First up, the lead belchers. These guys look cool. They look. This picture reminds me. All right, this is a deep cut. If you guys know the, I think it's Disney, the Atlantis movie, which I friggin' love. The old animated movie Atlantis. I think he's French. Is he French or Italian? God, it's been a long time since I've seen it. You know what? He's got to be Italian. He's like the demolitions expert guy who just wants to blow everything up. He's got like a sick mustache. You know, if you've ever seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's what these guys remind me of. It's like, yeah, just gonna blow everything up. So these dudes look awesome. Let's read what they're about. The Atlantis deep cut. God, that's such a cool movie. It is easy enough to spot ogres from a lead belcher unit, for their faces are scorched. They bear severe powder burns, regularly feature eye patches, and often resort to protective metal plates hammered into their faces. This is the legacy of point-blank detonations and an imperfect, if not downright clumsy, understanding of black powder. Regardless, these hardy and noticeably deaf ogres feel it is well worth sacrificing eyebrows, an eye, or even a few fingers for the chance to level their devastating cannons at a foe. Unique characteristics: obscene range for missile infantry, hurling projectiles across the battlefield from their mighty cannons. What we did, you see, is take an ogre and then give him a massive gun. So once his ammo's ran out, he's still an ogre. Smart, see? Pretty smart. These are significant armor-piercing properties to a massive ball of lead fired from a cannon larger than a man. That would make sense to me. Okay, so there is... I don't know why they separated these two, but there's a Stonehorn harpoon launcher variant. That's what I was referring to. I thought I remember seeing there was a ranged variant to the Stonehorn. So ogres have the greatest respect for Stonehorns, for the mammoth creatures are everything an ogre aspires to be: big, violent, strong, and rock hard. They never tire of telling and retelling their favorite accounts of a Stonehorn's prowess, or of the gory aftermath they leave after one of their stone-cracking charges. Whether it is the wide trails of dwarfs flattened and squished out of their armor, the wet crunching sounds a Stonehorn makes when plowing through Skaven hordes, or fond remembrances of giants pile-driven deep into the ground, such blood-drenched tales are greedily called for at any ruckus ogre feast. So they put a harpoon launcher on a Stonehorn. They took a Stonehorn, already a humongous monster that can crush units beneath its hooves, and put a crossbow that fires spears on top of it. The ogre who invented this is essentially as close to Einstein as they ever got. Agreed. What a genius. A true hero of his people. The Ogre Kingdom's cavalry and chariots. So first up, we've got the Mournfang Cav. We've seen these guys in the game already. They are quite impressive. High up the slopes of the Mountains of Mourn lives a cave-dwelling beast that has always attracted the attention of the ogres, the Mournfang. Aggressive predators that stalk the icy slopes, they are led by the largest of their kind, and working together they can hunt and kill anything that lives in that harsh domain. Mournfangs have a monstrous tenacity that makes even the most powerful of creatures think twice about confronting them. Ogres' tales tell of defiant Mournfangs refusing to give ground, and every tribe is a story about a beast continuing to fight long after drawing its last breath. Powered by thick haunches of purest muscle, a Mournfang surges towards the foe at a speed faster than their muscle-bulked frames would suggest, not slowed in the least by the large ogre or saddle atop its hairy back. Protected by thick skin and coarse shaggy hair, enemy arrows bounce off the upcoming beast or ping off the ogre's armor as harmless hailstones. When they do smash into an enemy, the powerful Mournfangs chomp, slash, and stamp the foe, whilst the ogres lay about them, swinging ponderous clubs to bludgeon them. So they have the standard variant, Iron Fist variant, and then the Great Weapon variant. Essentially giving an ogre even more weight and greatly increased speed. Mournfangs would be deadly on their own, never mind with a slab of meat on their backs. Their variants bring extra defense for extended engagements, or anti-large weapons for ogre civil wars, or whatever else an ogre counts as large. If all dogs go to heaven, we assume Mournfangs have their own closed-off area. That's awesome. Go back and watch that movie. That movie is... I was about to curse. That movie is freaky as hell. That's a weird, weird movie they would never make today because it would give children nightmares. Alright, Crushers. Because I watched it a while back and I was like, I need to be doing some sort of like LSD or something to watch this movie. Crushers. Despite the inhospitable weather, the mountains of Morn teem with life. Herds of great woolly beasts are plentiful, crisscrossing the boulder-strewn slopes and snowy plateaus seeking food. There are primeval creatures that have existed unchanged since the world was still covered in ice. Crushers ride one such animal, the Rhinox. A hard-headed and hyper-aggressive beast, Rhinoxen are notoriously short-sighted and rely on their sense of smell to catch wind of predators. They are likely to lower their heads and charge anything they catch a whiff of that doesn't smell like a Rhinox. As the weather atop that icy realm is as likely to be blinding as anything else, such short-sightedness isn't too much of a drawback. Yeah, being blind in a blizzard isn't that big of a deal. Also, their double-horned and stone-hard heads, can cause considerable damage. Even a frost dragon would move hastily to get out of the way of a stampeding herd of the great shaggy beasts. So an Iron Fist and Great Weapon variant also. I can't wait to make like all cav ogre armies. That's probably going to be the move for me. I cannot wait. It's going to be so sick. Unique characteristics, essentially Mournfang riders that have decided to be incredibly hard. Being crashed into by a Rhinox is somehow more painful than being crashed into by a Mournfang. Most who have experienced the latter wouldn't agree that was possible. And really quite stunningly massive. That's going to be sick. I'm stoked. Alright. And then last up here we've got the artillery and war machine. So first up, the scrap launcher. The Gnoblar scrap launcher is a large and unconventionally built catapult pulled along by an enormous woolly beast. Its design is haphazard, the ramshackle construction seemingly built on the go with a random collection of cast-off materials. With each stride of its shaggy beast of burden, the jury-rigged device teeters precariously while a frenetic crew of Gnoblars swarm about, running alongside, clambering on its ropes and pulleys like sailors amongst the rigging, or just hanging on for dear life. For all its slovenly appearance, the Gnoblar scrap launcher is a devastating engine of destruction. A massive range, even compared to other siege weapons. I'm expecting something similar to the dwarf grudge thrower, is what I'm thinking. The Rhinox pulling this Gnoblar construction is happy to trample anyone in range should smaller units approach, and then while the ramshackle ammunition is plenty fine for scattering infantry formations, it's unlikely to penetrate thick armor. So good to know. I think what they're saying is you can kind of use them as almost like chariots in a pinch, and there are no pushovers in melee. Lastly here we have the Iron Blaster, one of the castle-mounted guns the Sky Titans used towards the end of their war against the Ogres. Such is the weight of the vast contraption that the Rhinox, which pulls it, grunts and strains under the pressure, and even the stone wheels that hold it up can only last for a few battles before cracking under the immense weight. Its multiple cannonballs are able to tear apart a whole regiment in a maelstrom of noise and violence, especially should the Iron Blaster get in close. Unique characteristics: will annihilate anything it targets with a huge weapon strength. The Rhinox pulling the Iron Blasters is happy to fight back as its scrap launcher cousins, and can run out of ammo fairly quickly. Alright, cool. Good to know. And then lastly here, this little note. A true melting pot of incredible strength. That's the Ogre Kingdom's roster. We'll be back tomorrow to talk campaign mechanic and starting locations for Grecius and Scag. They're chomping at the bit to get out. Yeah, I can't wait. And maybe we'll get a better look at the map as well. The campaign map. That would be nice. That'd be nice to see it. I didn't think I would get this excited, but the descriptions of their artillery even sound awesome to me now. And I've seen some of them in the clips. You can kind of get a look at both variants. But guys, this was an excellent look at their roster. Some of the kind of ice-based units that were potentially going to be in the roster, the Yetis, what are those things called? They're like big frozen woolly mammoths with like frozen woolly mammoth looking tusks. Thunder tusks. I think they're called thunder tusks. There are other units here potentially for future DLCs. And there are other really cool ogre lords that could be brought in. I'm not sure if there's any ogre characters in the lore that have any ice affiliation, I guess is the word I'm trying to look for. But there's definitely ogres in the lore left to be made into new characters. So I'm excited to see that. But guys, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Brett. Channel's Goodtalk Gaming. And as always, y'all, I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys.